Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Interesting stuff to talk about again today. The incredibly sad story out of Penn State. A thorough investigation shows that top administrators knew very well that Jerry Sandusky was abusing kids, and they did nothing about it. We'll talk about the big, flashy new building that Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele wants to build on the lakefront. And we will talk about come-out-of-nowhere candidate Eric Hovde giving Tommy Thompson a pretty good run for his money. All right, let me introduce everybody. We know longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally, Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. We have Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional, and Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we'll talk about, Penn State brought in former FBI Director Louis Freeh to head the investigation into how Jerry Sandusky was able to get away with abusing so many kids on campus. Freeh came out with his report and very clearly says that top administrators, including Coach Joe Paterno, knew there was a problem and tried for years to hide it to protect the college and the football program. It is just mind-boggling that all of these people would consider the football program so important that they would let kids get sexually abused just to protect it?
It's sad.
Not just one or two, a bunch.
A bunch, and that's just on the surface. Those are the ones who've come forward and made accusations. I think several things happened that were good things, though, in light of what had happened. One is that the trustees had the good sense to hire someone like Louis Freeh that has integrity to conduct an unfettered investigation. The second, they came out and said they accept full responsibility for what had happened, which means there's probably not going to be a lot of contentiousness when it comes to settling claims. And the third is I'm hoping that the Paterno family will move forward on this. They don't seem to be acknowledging as much responsibility for Joe Paterno's role in this, even though there's a strong paper trail that indicates that he knew far more than he owned up to at the time that all of this began to break publicly. I think this is a story, though, that's going to have even more legs going forward because of the civil lawsuits that are going to ensue, and the number of others that will probably now come forward since they have made it clear that this guy was just vile.
Kevin, what kind of upbringing would somebody have to know that children are being abused and not to say anything just to protect your place of employment?
It's disgusting. It's despicable. I'm not sure what was going through Joe Paterno's mind or the minds of some of those university presidents who also were complicit because they knew Joe Paterno was told explicitly and did nothing, absolutely did nothing to limit the situation, put limitations on Jerry Sandusky and protect children. And basically, you have the former head of the FBI saying, and correctly so, that Joe Paterno lied in a court of law to protect a child serial rapist. Penn State needs to take care of this matter quickly. It needs to make this go away. And the football program needs to be directly targeted and punished because they kept quiet in order to salvage football, to protect that sport. So if you don't punish the football program, then what you're doing is leaving the goal of the cover-up intact. I think you need to do, as one local columnist is submitting out in Pittsburgh, you need to impose the death penalty. It's only been done once. It was done to
on who?
On the football program. The death penalty being, and it's only been done once, SMU back in the late 80s. You basically take the program away for a couple of years as proper punishment. And then you mentioned the civil lawsuits which are coming, make the payouts, do it quickly so that this doesn't become a long, drawn-out affair. But the Penn State needs to suffer. Because it is reprehensible and unconscionable that they knew that this was going on and did nothing about it.
Do you devastate the football program if there were hundreds and hundreds of people who went through that program who didn't do anything wrong?
Yeah, that's the quandary I'm in, actually, is that it wasn't the program that did it. It was some very bad people, including people who in this nation had a lot of respect and don't deserve to have had it. Joe Paterno specifically. They just speak.
He's lucky he's
dead.
Bad
of the dead.
He's lucky he's not around because he'd be in jail.
The truth of the matter is, he was revered and idolized, and now after the fact, we know he didn't deserve. It's too late for Penn State to act quickly. They didn't act, and because they acted, more young people, more children were abused. And that is directly on their hands because they knew it and they didn't stop it. They tried to do some things to protect themselves. I know that religion and football tend to be intermingled at times, and some people treat football as if it were a religion, but this is so similar to what happened within the Catholic Church. It is protecting the institution, and it is people who were supposedly moral people, who were supposedly the keepers of morals, and the teachers of morals. And the truth of the matter is, behind closed doors, they will hide things, they will cover up things, and they will allow things to continue that simply should not have been allowed to continue, and it was criminal to allow them to continue. But at the same time, every one of those people who are culpable and are still alive, yes, needs to be prosecuted, but I don't see throwing out a program that, in fact, the participants in it in that college, whether they're players or fans or alumni or what, good God, you try to change the name of a team in the United States, and everyone who's ever gone to that college goes crazy. It wasn't the program that did this; it was some very bad people.
Well, what you can do with those current players is you can say, look, we will relax some of the rules and regulations and allow you to transfer out if you don't want to be around this program any longer.
I don't think you do that to the players. I mean, people can self-select out if they choose to do so with no penalty. But the program itself wasn't the problem. It was the men who were in charge of it and the men who had power. That was the problem, not the program itself. I think one of the things that we saw that came out of this report is what everybody suspected for a long time, and that Joe Paterno was not just the football coach. Joe Paterno had more power than the president of the university. Yeah. When the president of the university, when the athletic director, when the provost, all wanted to be able to report Sandusky to the Department of Children and Families in Pennsylvania because of what was witnessed by a graduate assistant, the person who put the kibosh on it was Joe Paterno. So this is an issue of how, my gosh, I think we can see how absolute power corrupts absolutely. There was no concern about these children. The only concern was for that particular program and not wanting to have any bad publicity. Don't kill the program. These young men have already suffered.
They did it at SMU, and the same argument was we can't punish these kids.
I don't think
but you have to punish the institution.
But I think the way you punish the institution is, right now you've got an athletic director who's on leave. Based on this report, he needs to be dismissed. You have a president who's resigned as president but who remains on the faculty as a professor. He needs to be fired. That's what Penn State needs to do now. What it has in its control is to be able to fire these individuals, to separate them from the university, and to fully cooperate with the criminal investigations that will and need to follow. And the university is going to pay a huge price.
I think you're right. But for him being an enabler of child serial rape, I don't think just taking his statue down is enough. You have to be very, very serious
and I think they will be.
You hand out.
Their biggest punishment is they're going to pay a lot of money to those, and rightfully so, to those individuals who are harmed. And if there's a way to do it, those young men who were abused after the 2001 incident, those are the people who they really need to take a look at paying even a larger amount.
Football away, that's really going to sting.
Unfortunately, the people who will end up paying are the taxpayers, who are even more removed from that situation because it's a state institution and all those obligations to pay out are going to fall on the shoulders of the state.
All right, next topic. The other day, Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele unveiled plans for a shiny new high-rise apartment complex and hotel that he wants built on a prime piece of county-owned lakefront property. Well, some county board members are a little bit miffed that because they are now expected to be a rubber stamp for Abele and say, yes, this is great, let's go ahead with it. So they're going to hold everything up until they get to have more of an opportunity for input. Do they have a good point, or will this turn into another Park East where nothing gets done for years and years and years?
Somewhere back in the dusty archives of the Milwaukee Journal, there's a column I wrote saying building a bus station on the lakefront was the dumbest idea I'd ever heard of. And I have to say that of the proposals, this one is the only one that keeps the development south of the O'Donnell Park and that vista onto the Calatrava. And I hated the idea of building some development on the lakefront that would block what I think is the best view in the city that belongs to all of us and shouldn't be able to be purchased by any developer. I think the problem between the county board and Chris Abele is a continuing problem between them, and is that Chris is used to getting things done, is used to taking action, not having to consult with a lot of people. He did say he followed the procedure that the previous board chair had, or I think finance chair had told him to follow.
Johnny Thomas?
No, not Johnny.
That was the previous finance committee chair.
Karen Ordnance, I believe.
Going way back. Yeah.
She was involved in the development committee and said, make a proposal to the county board and make a recommendation.
DeBruin, I think.
Yeah, DeBruin. And I often get those two mixed up. And the county board wants County Executive Chris Abele to give them respect.
Bow and kiss their ring. Let's just say what it is.
Quit acting on his own. He's sort of like Dave Schultz, the previous county executive we talked about, that it was used to getting things done and didn't have a lot of patience with all of the political rigmarole and who all you have to bow down to.
I don't
and all
think Chris
that.
has the same chutzpah as Dave Schultz, so I'm sorry.
And I think it's all going to go forward, and it's going to be a good thing, and the county's going to make good money off of it and start some good development in the right place. I don't see this political quibbling as doing much.
But why?
But will it ruin
Why?
the plan if all of a sudden you have to have all these public hearings and public input?
it's a public project.
It's public land.
It's as my late father used to say, and I've lived here all my life, Milwaukee is the last rose on the bush. Why must we always deliberate and argue and debate till the doggone issue is, to death, when it's the consensus is that this is a marvelous idea. Mm-hmm. It's perfect. It's perfect for that location, and it's true. You have a faction in this community that doesn't want to even put a park bench on the lakefront. Yet you have this beautiful plan that would make all kinds of sense on many levels, and yet you have egos at play here on the county board. Well, you didn't talk to us, and you didn't have a meeting, and we want to talk about it, and we don't want to act too swiftly because we've got our August recess coming up, and bringing up all these smoke screens instead of doing what's right for the community. This is a history of what has gone on in Milwaukee. Whenever something big and splashy is proposed, this is how we react.
Arguably, it is the most prized piece of public-owned property in the state of Wisconsin.
Right.
Maybe they shouldn't move so quickly.
Joel alluded to the fact that the mistake was putting the bus barn there to begin with.
Which is a piece of you-know-what.
Right,
yeah.
and it was then, and it may prove that this is a piece of you-know-what too.
I doubt
I don't have a problem with taking an extra 2 months for some additional scrutiny of the project. Frankly, I don't like the way this was unveiled to the public, that here is a prime piece of public property. There were proposals that came through. This is the one that we want. Boom, boom, boom. This is the developer. There's an awful lot of money that is at stake here, and there's an awful lot of inability to go back and undo some things. I mean, once that tower goes up, you think taking the bus barn down is going to be a feat. It will be near impossible to deconstruct a building that some will later think may have been a mistake. I also think that what happens when you put that building up, no one has thought about all the ancillary projects that are going to piggyback on that, and what that means. Do you then get rid of O'Donnell Park? Do you then begin to talk about some of the properties that are just immediately to the west, outside of First Wisconsin? All of these things then become part and parcel of that one building that will then drive all of the other development in that area. And I just don't think any thought was given.
Those sound like nice problems to have. To me, that's growth and progress.
It is. And, I think that as part of the process of reviewing this, there is plenty of time for the county board to weigh in as part of the normal process. You don't have to say, well, we weren't consulted, so we're not happy, so we're going to sit on this for 2 months. That's what makes us look small and makes people think twice about whether or not they want to invest in Milwaukee County. Part of the regular process gives the opportunity for all of these questions to be asked. You don't have to, look like you've got your thumb up your nose about saying, well, I wasn't talked to, so I'm not going to move this forward, and I'm going to exert my power.
Let's deal with it when I come back from vacation.
Right.
The board has the responsibility.
I agree.
To not just pass on this, but it's a weak county executive, strong board. That's the way it was set up.
But let's not talk about the process of the board.
They can't pass on something that one part of the government has made a decision on.
And that's why it comes to the county board, so the board has the ability to do that.
Right.
You can do that through the regular process. You don't need to make yourself look small by saying, we're mad, so we're going to take our cards and go home for a month, and then we're going to come back and play. That's when developers don't want to be part of the process. I think they have given a lot of thought to what else, what's the next step. They're not perhaps talking about it publicly, but
you don't go to a drawer and pull out a massive plan like this. This probably took months and months and months of closed door deliberations.
They know what the next step is.
With no public input.
Well, there's going to be public input.
There will be now because the board has put the brakes on the approval.
Here's the problem, and we alluded to this before, particularly when it comes to discussion about the lakefront. We've got such wide factions in terms of people who don't want anything to be there but, God bless them, trees and flowers and seagulls. And that's okay, that's that point of view. But the other point of view is that we have a valuable piece of property there that, quite frankly, if you take a look at what we've done to our lakefront in terms of public access and leaving large pieces of it available for the public to be able to use, to take a look at a piece that's across the street from the lake, I think is a smart thing.
We've underutilized our lakefront.
Yeah.
And with this too, I don't want to be talking if God, willing, we're still here, this motley crew 10 years from now, still talking about this on a Friday night.
There's a chance. There's a chance.
Let's not put any bets on that one. Tommy Thompson is the big name in the Republican race to replace retiring Senator Herb Kohl. From day one, most people considered him to be the favorite. But new polls show that millionaire newcomer Eric Hovde may be closing the gap and that all his advertising may be paying off. I still think it's going to be your buddy Thompson running against Tammy Baldwin.
I believe that too. Several things have happened in this race. One is that Hovde has spent uncontested millions of dollars in defining himself. That was key. He hired good people to help him craft his message, get it out. I tend to think that he's a different kind of person than what the ads portray. And now you've got 3 candidates that have turned their attention onto him, and they're going to define him differently than what his ads have attempted to define him. I also think he doesn't have a natural constituency. They're just people who arguably are looking for something different that find him attractive. Will that be enough to overwhelm those that have a ground game? And I'm saying that Newman has a ground game. Thompson has a ground game. Hovde does not have that same ground game. He's been fighting over the airwaves, and he's still, based on one poll, 13 points behind. Once all the other candidates begin to turn their money onto him, I don't think you're going to see in the next 3 weeks that same margin that Hovde had in one poll where he was neck and neck. I don't think you're going to see that hold.
Why couldn't Mark Newman do with his millions what Hovde's done with his?
Well, I think because Gerard alluded to this, what Hovde's doing is he's defining himself. Mark Newman, because of all the different races that he's run, has already been defined. You know, so for Mark Newman, it's as much, I think, about seeing where polls start to show, where not just external, but their own internal polls, and then decide where you're going to throw your money, and decide how you're going to come after which candidates, because that's what it is about for somebody like Mark Newman at this point, because he's a very well-known commodity. You know, I think, Gerard, kind of going back to the question about what's his natural constituency. In some ways, you could have asked that same question about Ron Johnson.
Absolutely.
And I think there are some great similarities between those two campaigns, where you have people who are relatively unknown to the state as a whole, who certainly have made their mark within the business community, and that's their strength. That's what they sell about themselves. And if you take a look at what Ron Johnson did, certainly he was very able to build a ground game after the primary.
Could Baldwin,
he went into the primary.
I think Baldwin can beat Tommy Thompson or Eric Hovde. I do think, you may remember that on this show a few weeks ago, I said it wasn't going to be Tommy Thompson, or it might not even be a politician. It would be somebody some businessman who runs, and you know, as a new face, just like Ron Johnson did. Now I'm afraid that it's going to come true, because I think this Eric Hovde is an extremely dangerous individual. No one knows anything about him, and he's been able to buy enormous goodwill just by being on TV all the time with $4 million, $4 million worth of TV exposure. And you know, all anyone knows about him is what the Journal Sentinel has told you, which is nothing. Which, you know, is that he's a banker or something. You know, this is a guy that's worth maybe $250 million, some of which he has hidden in the Cayman Islands, like Mitt Romney.
That's a popular place.
Yeah, it sure is. And I've said all along that there's a good chance that Tommy is not going to be the nominee. Now I'm afraid it could be this guy. The problem you have, and your friend Tommy has, Gerard, is that they're not just going to aim at Hovde; they're also going to aim at Tommy. And those are the two targets. Those are the two targets, and it could be really ugly. And that's why I think Tammy is coming out okay.
You know, a lot of people argued that Herb Kohl was just a millionaire who bought the job too, though.
Well,
he did a lot of good things too.
Hovde is trying to paint himself as this political outsider, and he is. He's the only one in that group that is not a current or a former elected official. But I think it's still Tommy's to lose. Where's this surge coming from for Hovde? He maybe has separated himself a little from Newman and Fitzgerald, but he's still a dozen points behind Tommy. And we're you know, the rub on Tommy is that he's 71 years old and he's that old Republican guard. And here comes Hovde, a fresh new face like Ron Johnson. Where Tommy's strength is, though, and they're going to go after him because they realize he is the guy to beat, and he can beat Tammy Baldwin. Tommy can, as he's always done. I mean, he won 4 straight statewide elections by big margins. He's popular and can be attractive to those crossover votes.
But
that will help him.
To the Tea Party that now controls the Republican Party.
Well,
that was the old Tommy Thompson.
And the Tea Party has to understand that Tommy cut taxes. He created jobs. He ended welfare, as we know.
He also did some good things.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's done. He has a history that the Tea Party should embrace.
This is not the same party of Tommy Thompson.
I'm sorry. We're out of time.
We're out of time. We're done. Tommy Thompson is not the only prominent politician wrestling with aspects of his past. The man who will be heading the Republican ticket this November has a very different piece of history to contend with. Here's Rick Horowitz to explain.
Who'd have imagined it? Who'd have figured that 2012 would finally be Romney's year? No, not that Romney, the other Romney. Yeah, George Romney. Talk about a late career surge. He is, after all, dead at the present time, as Casey Stengel used to say. But he's having a terrific run lately. Better than his son's been having, that's for sure. George Romney was a rich guy, true, but a self-made rich guy. That's what people keep pointing out. He started out with next to nothing and still became the head of an auto company, and then governor of Michigan, and then a presidential contender. He wasn't brought up in great wealth and privilege, unlike his son. And you keep hearing how transparent George Romney was about his finances when he was running for president back in the 60s. How he released a dozen years of tax returns, Releasing just 1 year, he said, could be a fluke, something you just do for show. So he released 12 of them, unlike his son. His son released just 1 year, and even that one had to be dragged out of him during the primaries. Meanwhile, there are all sorts of questions still floating around out there about Swiss bank accounts and such. See, most presidential candidates don't park their money in the Cayman Islands. And the more this Romney digs in, refuses to release more information, the more people wonder, what else is he hiding? Nobody asked that about his father. Then there's the whole question of civil rights. George Romney, everyone's been saying, was a fighter for civil rights, for equal rights, as governor, then as a cabinet member in Washington. Hard to believe, but there used to be lots of Republicans who fought for civil rights. Now they're pretty much extinct. I think there's still a few in museums. Anyway, that was the father, a civil rights warrior. The son, not so much. Or didn't you catch his speech this week to the NAACP? No, nice that he went, and that he didn't just tell them what they wanted to hear and pander to them. Finally, an audience he wouldn't pander to. Makes you wonder, though, if he was pandering to a different audience. So here's the thing. It's hard enough running against an incumbent president, but now Mitt Romney also has to run against George Romney. Good luck with that.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Stay cool, stay comfortable, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.